Hello and welcome to our second episode about Spring Boot. In this episode, and after, of course, the first one or the previous one, where we generated the zip file for the Spring Boot project, I just unzipped the file and imported to IntelliJ. You can use IntelliJ, it's a great IDF to develop a Java application, but if you want to use Eclipse and Visual Studio Code, it should work also, because at the end of the day, you just unzip and you have the complete structure of the Java project to be used. And after that, it's just common building and run the application. And as I said before, I will not be using any specific feature for a specific IDE. I will just use the Java source files and generate applications and run them. And most of the time you will be using or a database server or the web browser to call, or maybe a REST client like Postman or Visual Studio Code client, something like that, to execute our APIs. So there will be no specific thing regarding the IDE. So choose the IDE that you are most comfortable of. Okay, at this time you should have this structure for your project, meaning that you have this folder Maven, and if you expand the Maven, you can see you have a properties file to with an address of the if necessary to download Maven, and I will be executing the commands using Maven. You can do it. It's one of the things that Spring Boot has. It's a standard way to build and execute the project. It's not linked to a specific operating system. It can take the Maven and do everything from it. Okay, and I will show you in a moment. So we have the main application in the package that we define as our base, and it's just one line, like Spring application run backend server application dot class and possible arguments. This behind this annotation, there are a lot of things happening, and the same can be said about this run, and explain in a future episode. It's not relevant now to understand how Spring Boot works behind the scenes. Let's first start to learn how to create an API and access a database, and later, when we are comfortable with the features, then we will try to understand how it works behind the scenes. For this example, and if you want to follow, I just create two classes. One, it's a user. It's just a class named user with two attributes, username and password. So we have an object to start off before we start to implement a full application, and with just a constructor where I can receive username and password. So it should be easy for me to create an instance with some value, so we can, for instance, return in a REST API, and then it just gets and sets and a toString just to display in case we want some logging on our application. It's just a class like this. It's a lot of lines, but at the end of the day, this tree should be enough for you to create this file. If you think it's useful, I can share this code on the link to the video. Maybe I will, but if it's not there, probably I will publish the video and later put the zip file there. Not there, of course, YouTube doesn't allow it, but at least on a GitHub, I will have to create a specific place just to put this code. But if you want, I can share it. But it's quite simple at this time. It's just to create this class. I'm putting on a package name and domain under the backend server, and I create another one, which is a REST, and it's just a class named public class hello RestController. Okay, and you should have this annotation RestController. RestController means that the Spring should look into this class to expose addresses that you can use, for instance, as a client or REST API, for instance, in the browser, Postman, or even another application calling the REST API. So this is a controller. A REST controller, it's a specific class that works as a controller in the pattern MVC, model view controller. But I will explain about this pattern in future videos. For this one, just accept, if it's the first time you are seeing it, that when you add this annotation here, Spring Boot magically will find this class and will start to check the methods inside if we can find something, for instance, like this one, get mapping. Get, it's the verb in the web when you click, for instance, when you click in the browser in HTTP, when you click something, you are doing a get, meaning that you are getting some information. There are other things like post, delete, and put, but that for another time. For now, we just want to go to the browser and write an address with this suffix /hello, and I expect to see in the browser something like hello world. Spring will detect this is a string, so it will send a string to the browser, and another one that I created which is called users, and then I'm returning this object. That's the reason I created this class here. It's not necessary any configuration here, any annotation, it's not necessary. Okay, so I just return user, and then I'm creating the user with a username and password, and when I return this object, Spring Boot by default will serialize to JSON, which is the default structure for JavaScript. That's why people love Spring Boot, because if you are using a REST client, for instance in Angular, React, or Vue, when you call a REST API in Spring Boot, automatically you are receiving JSON. So you can use directly the structure in your JavaScript web page. Okay, so we expect to see when we call this string, and when we use this address, we expect to see a JSON with these two different properties. One is username and the other is password. So how can we execute this application? The application is only this class and this one. By the way, this class, RestController, it's in this package REST. Okay, so these are the only two classes that I added, so you can add it. Maybe you can pause the video now, you write the code if you want, you try yourself. It is just this code that you are seeing here. There is no configuration, hidden configurations, nothing. It is just the code that you are seeing here. And now here we can do something like Maven. Here, this Maven, it is this command. If you look here, you have this Maven here, or maybe you want to use Maven like we have there, like this, Maven W. You can see here, and then we can write Spring Boot run. Spring Boot, it's the technology dot run, and since we are at the root of this project backend, he will be clever to try to find the Maven, local Maven, and will run the application. If it's not compiled, it will compile it, and it will generate the jar class that will be put in this target or the classes, and then it will execute our Spring Boot application. Okay, let's run. Okay, not with the W, maybe like this. Okay, scanning for projects, it's building, probably executing some testing. And now you know that your Spring Boot is running usually because you can see this banner. It's possible to switch off this banner using configurations, but for now we will just display it every time. So we have the Spring Boot, the versioning, and if you look to the output, okay, it's using Java 23 because as not the code, because we choose 17 and we can confirm here on our POM. You can see that the Java version being used in this project 17, but in my machine I have installed 23, so it's using 23 to execute, but the code for our application it's the 17. Okay, so profiles is something that we should talk later when we speak about beans. But you can see here the Tomcat initialized in port 8080. It's possible and quite easily to change this port, but it means that if you go to the browser and write something like localhost 8080, we should see the Tomcat, not our application, but the Tomcat running. This is a port for Tomcat. It doesn't mean that our application is running on this port. For that, we should have addresses, and we added a few of them, as you can see on the RestController, and we have two addresses that we can use after this port to find our project. But it's very configurable. We can change this address, we can change the port, you can even add a name after the port if you have different projects on the same machine. Okay, and so we have the root application here, and it is considering our application at the root. But if we want, we just set a configuration and we can write here something like the name of our project, for instance, backend server, or maybe another name like store, something like that, whatever you want. And it took almost 2 seconds to start and run the application. Remember that this is not a common application. it is an application that started a Tomcat, and inside the Tomcat, our application was deployed to the web server Tomcat, and now our application is available to be executed. So let's see if it's really being executed or not. So, okay, these were experiences that I did in the past. If I just write localhost 8080, you can see an error, but it's not an error. It's just, sometimes people, they say it's an error, but it's not, because if you read, you can see that this application has no explicit mapping for error. This means that when Spring Boot is trying to find a specific controller because this is the same as writing this, but there is no address in our application for /. We have one that it's hello and the other one is users, but for the root we don't. So you will try to find a controller that has the error on it, and if it finds, it will display the return of this method. This is the way it works. We will talk later about this error handling. There are a lot of ways to handle errors on Spring Boot, but he couldn't find, so he returned not an error, but a common return value, which is not found. Not found is not an error. It's just Tomcat saying, okay, you try to access something, but I don't have nothing in that place. Maybe you should try another address. And we will try our hello, like this. And voila, our hello world. Okay, and you can see that's the thing that we expected to see. It's a string that our method was returning, and you can say here. So when we wrote hello in our localhost 88, at the end of the day it will be localhost, then this, because it's the context part of our application, the localhost, then the port, then the context path, and then the REST controllers. And the REST controllers are below this context path, which is the hello and users, okay? So, and now for the users, and you can see that's in JSON, okay? It took our object and generated a JSON format, very useful to exchange information with other systems or to be used as a server or as information for any browser application, such as Angular, React applications, JavaScript applications, because at the end of the day, JSON is just JavaScript structure. It is an object. An object in JavaScript is defined with these symbols here and this concept of a property and a value. So this is our first Spring Boot application. It seems a very simple one, but if you think for a while, you already have a server that is running, that you can put running in any place, and you can create a client application in a browser application, for instance, and just start to call these REST APIs that return values. In other videos, I will show you how to pass parameters, using parameters, headers, things like this, for instance. It's quite easy on Spring to do that. But for now, you already have a server that you can play and learn more about the Spring Boot. So please go ahead, try it, play with it. On our next video, I will go into more detail about these REST configurations and how to expose other kind of parameters and information using our REST controllers. So I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you for watching.